getting into our first segment of the day, talking about the grades for the biggest free agency moves. We had one of the crazier free agencies in recent history, so we are going to break down all of the biggest deals and talk about how they grade out. Starting with Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta Falcons. This was the big-time quarterback free agency move that we really haven't seen in years. It's not often that we see a good quarterback hit unrestricted free agency, but that's what we got. Cousins signs for a 4-year deal worth $180 million. Clearly, it is an example of why we don't normally see quarterbacks get into that unrestricted free agency, because a desperate team will go out and pay them the big time money. So franchises typically operate in the idea of trying to retain their franchise guys. While $45 million in average annual salary for Kirk Cousins is definitely a lot, it will just be $25 million against their cap hit this upcoming season. It will be $40 million the next season, and then the Falcons have an out after either 2 or 3 years as well. So if this were to backfire, it's not like they would be stuck with this massive Russell Wilson type debacle going forward, where the Broncos are going to be eating on $85 million in dead cap space over the next 2 seasons. The Falcons bring in Kirk Cousins, who I still think that he does have enough left in the tank that he can provide them at least what they need, which is reliability, stability in the position where they have really been struggling to fill ever since the end of Matt Ryan's career in Atlanta. Cousins is entering his age 36 season, and he's coming off of a torn Achilles, which is some cause for concern. Not the most mobile quarterback in the world, but is also a significant injury to a player at any position. So we'll see how he is able to bounce back. But I do think he can prove to be the right decision for the Falcons based off of, does he have necessarily a big-time playoff resume behind him? He does not, but the Falcons were just looking to do a couple things. They want to be more competitive. They want to have competency at the quarterback position after a disastrous season this past year between Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, and yet they still won 7 games, so they feel like they could be in a closer position. Also, the way that Arthur Smith was running that show, it did seem to be a bit of a circus. Now they bring in Raheem Morris, who was just with the Rams for their Super Bowl win a couple years ago. I think is a great defensive mind and should help to resurrect this defense as well, that did overachieve to some degree last season as well. But again, this is about the quarterback position and the types of numbers that Ridder / Heineke were putting up last year. Threw for just 207.3 yards per game. That ranked 22nd in the NFL. They were 26th in passing touchdowns, 26th in points per game, and they were a dreadful red zone offense, and they ranked 29th in that category for touchdown percentage in the red zone. Cousins can also help the team evaluate some of these young pieces that they have added over the course of the past few years. They've used their first round picks the past 3 years on skill position players. It was tight end Kyle Pitts in 2021, Drake London in 2022, and Bijan Robinson last season. So ultimately there is some risk for this Cousins deal, but again, they were desperate for an improvement in quarterback. I personally think if you are a Justin Fields believer, they could have possibly went to get him, costed less long term, but the Falcons are favorites to win their division now. And I think that in a very open NFC, I am not going to ding a team for trying to be competitive. That's what we see in the NFL. Tanking in the NFL doesn't really work like that. So this should be a step in the right direction for them. I'm giving them an A- on this deal. Next up, we have Saquon Barkley joining the Philadelphia Eagles for $37.75 million. I think schematically he is going to be a great fit in Philadelphia. Now they have real Pro Bowl plus talent at each of the skill positions. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith at wide receiver, Dallas Goedert at tight end, and now Saquon at running back. Saquon is definitely an upgrade over DeAndre Swift, who, especially early in the year, showed some flashes, but there was a real stagnancy to not just the running game, but the offense as a whole. But especially with Justin Hurts dealing with the leg injury he was last year, he wasn't quite as mobile. And Swift did, again, a good job in open space, but I don't think that he necessarily has the vision of a Saquon Barkley in terms of being a lead back operating through a successful offensive line. And now for him, he doesn't have to be behind this faltering group, and he can be in an actual offense that has talent, has an offensive line, and he doesn't have to carry the workload. Of course, Saquon, he was the pretty much go-to guy out of any position on the Giants offense when they made their playoff run in the 2022 season, because of the fact that Daniel Jones is as limited as he is, and the Giants were able to find success riding the back of Saquon Barkley, and now for him personally, he doesn't have to do that. Now, there is still some injury concern with Saquon, and they did pay him a decent deal here in terms of total money, so I don't think that I think it's a good deal for a team that is trying to take the next step again, more so bounce back, but it is a decent amount of money. Now, what I do love about this deal is the fact that it's under $4 million in a cap hit for the upcoming season, so that shouldn't even hurt them whatsoever. They were able to use some of that salary cap because of the reduced cap hit in 2024 to go sign the likes of a Devin White in the linebacking core, CJ Gardner-Johnson in the secondary. So all in all, I give this deal an A- as well. Do I think that it makes them single-handedly a high-level contender? No. But I do like the flexibility that comes with this contract, and they have an out after the 2026 season, so they could end up paying Saquon over $10 million for just one season as a whole. I think this is a win for Eagles fans. We have Russell Wilson, who signed to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've talked about him a bunch this week, so I won't go too in depth, but one-year deal worth just over $1.2 million. That is a very low-risk signing that could potentially, if you still believe in Russell Wilson, raise their ceiling. Now, I don't believe that he necessarily has that in him to be any version of course, I think that the Super Bowl version of Russell Wilson that we saw in the early 2010s, we're past that, but how much of that can he recollect? I don't think he's a massive upgrade over Kenny Pickett, but it gives them a very solid option at a very low price. Just about the best bargain you can get for a quarterback outside of Brock Purdy's contract with the 49ers. So ultimately, I give this move a B. It doesn't move me all too much. It still doesn't have me ranking them up above the Ravens or the Bengals within their own division, but I do think that it is a very solid move. Ultimately, it's pretty much a no-brainer, and I think it's a good thing that they decided to go with this. They were reported that they didn't want a veteran quarterback before they changed their mind, bring in Wilson, and I think it is a fine move. Derrick Henry scored a 2-year deal worth $16 million with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is a move that just aesthetically and as a football fan, I can get really excited for, just because I think that it's going to be so fun watching Lamar Jackson have a bruiser like Derrick Henry in the backfield for really the first time of his career. Now, he's had some good running backs in the backfield as far as talent, but they've, couple things. One, been very injury prone through Lamar's career, and two, they've been a different sort of speed. They've been the faster guys, a little bit more receiving threats. Derrick Henry, I just feel like, again, as a fan more than anything of the NFL, I'm just looking forward to seeing what that looks like with Lamar and the likes of a Derrick Henry. Henry, of course, has some history with the Ravens, as he was part of that Titans team that upset them a handful of years ago, back when the Titans were a perennial playoff team in that area. But when they were on their way to their AFC championship run, now he joins with Baltimore, and I just know that coaches are going to be losing sleep trying to figure out how they're going to scheme up a defense to stop a Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry read option. Now, I would like this even more. I'm really hoping that the Ravens can work out an improved play action game as well, because that's what we saw with Tennessee when Henry was with the Titans, where Ryan Tannehill was able to be extremely elevated at the quarterback position due to the fact that the run game was such a threat. And that can happen again. We saw their passing game between Lamar Jackson single-handedly developing as a passer last year, while also getting the best weapon he's had of his career in Zay Flowers. I think there is a lot of room for the Ravens to take their offense to another level based off of this deal. I give them an A+ on this one. Another deal that I love from this week is Christian Wilkins signing a 4-year, $110 million deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders understand what type of position they are in. They don't have a franchise quarterback themselves, and they play in a division with the greatest quarterback in the league in Patrick Mahomes. Justin Herbert is no slouch either. If you water down the NFL in the modern day, it is about having a quarterback yourself and stopping the other team's quarterback. And that is the route that the Raiders went with this move. They add Christian Wilkins to a defensive line that already has Max Crosby, and that is nightmare fuel for opposing quarterbacks. I think that the way that we saw the team as a whole be able to really rally around Antonio Pierce when he got the interim head coach job, and just the dedication. Max Crosby, of course, the standout for them, was very upset with how the past few years have gone for the Raiders, and he was very strongly, openly endorsing Pierce coming back. They do so. And now the Raiders look to continue into moving in the right direction. They signed Gardner Minshew as well, which I won't go too in-depth on, but if I were to, off the top of my head, give that deal a grade as well, I'd consider it a B, where Gardner Minshew was helping the Colts to be in contention for a playoff spot. And I think that the Raiders, now they don't have the running back now that Josh Jacobs left. The Colts had Jonathan Taylor, which they could lean on, and there's still a hole at that running back position for the Raiders. I think that Minshew is solid. He can help them compete on a game-to-game basis, but definitely provides more stability than what they had in the quarterback room last year. Speaking of Josh Jacobs, he gets a 4-year deal from the Packers worth $48 million. I see him as being a pretty similar talent to Aaron Jones with a little bit more upside. He was, of course, first team All-Pro just a couple seasons ago, led the league in rush yards and total scrimmage yards, but he had a quieter season last year, but I account that more so to the situation of the Raiders where their pass game was pretty much non-existent, and I expect there to be a bounce-back season in this spot. Aaron Jones was entering the last year of his deal. They tried to work out a deal with them, couldn't get done, so they end up releasing him. And Jacobs maybe isn't the biggest upgrade in the world, but it didn't cost them all too much. Now, Jacobs is making a decent amount of money in terms of average annual value of their contracts, but he's going to be just over $5 million against the cap this season. If it doesn't work out for whatever reason, they have an out in his contract after this year. I do think it's going to work. I think that Jacobs can further help this Packers team try and take another step in the right direction, as they may be a little bit of a, I don't even know if it's considered a full dark horse, but they are in a very solid position to contend next year in the NFC. I give this grade an A-. Last couple deals here. I lumped in together the Bengals signing safeties Geno Stone and Von Bell into one here. Geno Stone was with the Raiders last year. The Ravens last year, division rival. He was second in the NFL in interceptions. Von Bell, the safety for the Panthers, was released earlier this week. He went to the Panthers after signing a 3-year deal. He had previously played on the Bengals team that went to the Super Bowl. He was a captain of that team, and ultimately the Panthers just cut ties with him. He isn't maybe necessarily the level of player he was a couple years ago, but I really like these additions for the Bengals. That backside of the defense was a little bit weaker last year, and they had bigger problems, of course, with the injuries to Joe Burrow, but I love these moves. I'm giving this one an A as well. Finally, we're going to very briefly touch on it because we're going to get more in depth into the deal in the next segment, but we also had Keenan Allen, the 6-time Pro Bowler for the Los Angeles Chargers, get traded to the Chicago Bears for a 4th-round pick. Again, going to get into this on the other side of the break. I think this was a terrible deal for the Chargers. I'm giving them a D-, and you can find out why if you stick with us through the break. We will be right back and get more into that subject, so stick with us.